The lamps in Sindbad's hall burned low, their flames trembling like tired souls. The scent of amber and wine filled the air. Outside, Baghdad slept beneath the silver hush of the moon. The porter sat before his host, eyes wide, lips parted in awe. Sindbad leaned back against his cushions and said quietly, "My friend, you have heard of 6 voyages, of peril and deliverance, of kings and monsters. I swore never again to tempt the sea. But fate has ways of calling a man back to what he dreads most. One dawn, as I walked among my gardens, a trumpet sounded at my gate. The chamberlain of the Caliph himself entered, robed in white, bearing a sealed parchment heavy with gold thread. 'Sindbad, the commander of the faithful summons you,' he said. 'The King of Serendib has sent words of peace. You shall carry the Caliph's letter and gifts in return. None knows those waters better than you.' I bowed, but felt my heart sink. 'My lord,' I said, 'I am weary of the sea. My limbs still tremble at the memory of storms and serpents. Let another go in my place.' But the chamberlain smiled. 'The Caliph's wish is not a request, but a command.' So I went before Harun al-Rashid. The Caliph rose from his throne of gold and said with warmth, 'Sindbad, the seas have tested you 6 times already, and yet your name returns to me like the tide. Take this letter and these gifts, brocade and musk, silver vessels, a horse with golden trappings, and carry our friendship to the King of Serendib.' How could I refuse the ruler of the faithful? So I bowed and said, 'May God grant me safe passage and a faithful return.' And thus, unwilling yet obedient, I prepared for my 7th and final voyage. We sailed for 40 days beneath tranquil skies until green mountains rose from the sea like emeralds shining in mist. When I reached Serendib, the king himself met me at his palace gates. He embraced me and said, 'Sindbad, the sea obeys few men, yet it has carried you here twice. Rest now in our land as my guest.' He read aloud the Caliph's letter written in gold upon blue silk and rejoiced at its words. For weeks I dwelt in comfort, walking through gardens where fountains whispered and white peacocks shimmered among the palms. But at last, homesickness stirred in me like a tide rising unseen. I begged leave to depart, and the king, though reluctant, consented. He loaded my ship with ivory, spices, and jewels, saying, 'Tell your Caliph that the friendship of Serendib is written in our hearts, not merely in ink.' So I sailed again, my heart light with gratitude, never dreaming that the sea had one more trial in store. For days the voyage was calm. The crew sang as they worked, and I watched the horizon blush beneath the dawn. But one morning, the lookout cried, 'Black sails astern.' Out of the mist came 3 swift ships, lean as wolves and twice as cruel. Our captain ordered the sails cut and the oars taken up, but the pirates bore down upon us with terrifying speed. Arrows darkened the sky. The sea boiled with the clash of steel. Men screamed, boards split, and the deck ran red. At last, overpowered, we were taken. The pirates plundered everything, the Caliph's gifts, the king's treasures, even the clothes upon our backs. Then they bound us in ropes and divided us among themselves as spoils of war. I was sold to a merchant from a distant eastern land. He examined me like a beast, then nodded and said, 'Strong shoulders, steady eyes. You'll fetch a good price in labor, if not in wisdom.' He took me aboard his ship, and we sailed for many weeks until we reached a port I did not know. A city of narrow alleys and crowded markets, where men were bought and sold like sacks of grain. There, beneath the scorching sun, I stood upon a wooden block and was sold again, this time to a trader who dealt in rare goods and ivory. Thus the sea that had made me a merchant now made me a slave. My new master was not cruel, but cold. He said, "You will work in the forest. The elephants are our treasure. You will drive them toward my hunters." We journeyed into a vast wilderness where the air was heavy with the scent of rain and wild fruit. At night the forest roared with distant thunder, and at dawn the ground shook beneath the tread of giants. He told me to climb a tree and cast stones at the herds as they passed. When they charge, we strike from behind. Their tusks are wealth beyond measure. For many days I obeyed, though fear clung to my heart. Once, an enraged bull seized the trunk of my tree and shook it until I fell. The earth trembled beneath the herd. I thought my last moment had come. But then the great bull, older than any beast I had seen, stopped before me. Its eyes, dark as wells of sorrow, fixed upon mine. With strange gentleness, it lifted me upon its tusks and carried me away through the forest. For hours we traveled until we reached a valley bathed in sunlight, filled with ivory, tusks and bones gleaming like snow. There the elephant set me down unharmed and disappeared into the trees. And I understood. It had shown me the secret of its kind, the valley of their dead. When I returned and told my master what I had seen, he laughed bitterly. "Do not toy with me, Sindbad. No man has ever found such a place." But when I led him to the valley, his laughter turned to trembling. Before him lay mountains of ivory, a treasure no blade had won. He fell to his knees and covered his face, saying, "Forgive me, O Lord, for I have spilled the blood of creatures you have honored with memory and mourning." I said to him, "Swear before God that you will never again harm an elephant." And he did, pressing his hand upon the tusks as he vowed. After that day, he freed me from bondage and treated me as a brother. "Sindbad," he said, "God sent you to open my eyes. Take your share of this treasure, for without you I would have lived and died in sin." He loaded my beasts with tusks and fine goods, gave me gifts of gold and cloth, and blessed my departure. Thus, by mercy and not by might, I regained both my freedom and my fortune. I joined a merchant vessel bound for Basra. Among the cargo, I carried my share of ivory. As we sailed, I told my companions of my captivity, of the wise elephant, and of the oath my master had sworn. They listened as men listen to legend. The sea was kind this time. No storm rose, no wind betrayed us. When at last the shores of Basra shone before us like molten gold beneath the morning sun, I fell to my knees and wept. When I reached Baghdad, I went straight to the palace of Harun al-Rashid. I bowed low and said, "Commander of the faithful, I return by God's grace alone." The pirates attacked our ship and carried off all that the King of Serendib had given me, his gifts, his letters, and his tokens of friendship. Yet the king bade me deliver his greetings and to tell you that his love for you remains written not in silk, but in his heart. The Caliph smiled gently and said, "Your honesty and endurance are the truest gifts of all. You have faced every peril and returned with wisdom. May God reward you, Sindbad, as I do." He ordered fine garments and a purse of gold, and had the scribes record my 7 voyages to be kept among the treasures of his court. I returned home and prepared a feast, a humble thanksgiving after years of peril. Musicians played soft melodies, and my house filled with warmth and laughter. We ate, drank, and rejoiced until the night grew deep. Thus ended my 7th and final voyage. I gave charity to the poor, aided widows and orphans, and lived quietly among my family. At times I walked beside the Tigris at dusk, watching the ships drift past, their sails glowing red beneath the setting sun. The creak of masts and the scent of salt bring back faces of my companions, the brave, the lost, and the kind. I no longer envy the sailor who sets his sail, for I have learned that the greatest voyage is toward peace, and the surest harbor lies not in the sea, but in the mercy of God. When Sindbad finished his tale, the porter sat long in silence. At last the porter said, "Master Sindbad, I once envied your wealth, thinking it came without toil. Now I see that every dinar was bought with peril and endurance. May God reward your patience." Sindbad smiled and replied, "My brother, wealth without gratitude is a burden. Be content with your portion, for contentment is the treasure that never sinks." He then gave the porter a purse of gold and a fine garment, saying, "Take this, my friend. Envy fades, but thankfulness endures." The porter rose, kissed Sindbad's hand, and said, "By Allah, I shall never again curse my fate or envy another man." Sindbad embraced him and said, "Then we have both reached our journey's end, you upon the land, and I upon the sea." And thus ended the voyages of Sindbad the Sailor. He who had braved monsters and storms found at last the calm of a grateful heart. He lived the rest of his days in Baghdad, generous to the poor, humble before God, and content with what was written for him. For he learned that no pearl in all the seas shines brighter than a thankful soul. If you've journeyed with Sindbad through every peril and wonder, remember, the greatest adventure begins within your own heart. Subscribe for more timeless tales from around the world.